Which Toy Story movie is your favorite? Well, in today's video, I am going to rank all 4 Toy Story movies based on my point of view, and no, Lightyear does not count because it is a spin-off movie. This is the first video of a brand new series of videos coming up in the future of this channel, which will be a journey into finding out what are my favorite movies and TV series of all time. So if you're interested in watching upcoming episodes, then subscribe to this channel. It would be much appreciated. Leave a like or dislike if you want. And also tell me in the comment section down below what movie or TV series should I rank next as part of this new series of upcoming videos. So without further ado, let's jump right into the first movie of this franchise. Spoilers alert for all of the movies coming right up. But before reviewing this project, here's a quick explanation of my reviewing process. I have developed a system where each aspect has a percentage of importance on the overall final note of this project that can go up to 100%. So each percentage attributed to the aspects evaluated represents my rating of their importance in an overall project. So, for example, in my opinion, the plot is the most important aspect, so I gave it a bigger importance percentage than some other aspects that I find less important. You can rearrange the percentages attributed as you desire if you want to use my system to rate a project, on a note scaling from 0 to 100%. I also gave myself the right to add or remove some percentages if I find some amazing stuff or some massive mistakes throughout the project. Each aspect will be given a note from 0 to 5 stars, which will impact its percentage on the final note. This system can change in the future depending on if my feelings ever change, but for the moment it is its current version. Okay, it's time to stop the yapping and start the video. For real this time. Enjoy! Toy Story is an animated movie created by Pixar for Walt Disney Pictures. It was released on November 19, 1995 and has a runtime of 81 minutes, so 1 hour and 21 minutes. This movie is considered to be the first full-length computer-generated 3D animated featured film ever released. And so that's why I won't be criticizing this movie for how it looks because it's using old technologies. Because if you watch more recent creations, you can see difference quality-wise. So with all that context said, let's move on to the movie itself. Here's a resume of the movie. We start the movie with Andy, a kid that plays with his toys. And as the credits goes on, we see him play with Woody, his favorite toy. Woody is a cowboy sheriff, and we'll go more into his character later in this review. After the credits, we get a scene where we meet all of Andy's toys. Bo Beep, Slinky, Rex, Ham, Mr. Potato Head, and many more. We learn that Andy's family is expecting to move out pretty soon, and that Andy has a birthday party today, and that he might receive new toys from the gifts his friend will give to him. And so, Andy gets a Buzz Lightyear toy, a Space Ranger with a lot of functionalities. As soon as he enters Andy's room, he starts a delusional monologue about how his spaceship ended up on an unknown planet.
Buzz Lightyear mission log, stardate 4072.
Are you delusional? Do you suffer from a mental illness?
There, he meets Woody and the rest of the gang, but he seems really convinced to be a real Space Ranger. The toy gang also points out Sid outside, a kid living next door who abuses his toys all day long. And as the days go by, Buzz becomes the new shining light in Andy's life and overtakes Woody's place as his favorite toy. And so, Woody gets jealous and wants his favoritism back. He then accidentally pushes Buzz off from Andy's room main window. The toy gang then gets angry at Woody and then get interrupted by Andy, who's looking for Buzz because he wants to bring him to Pizza Planet, an arcade place. But he doesn't find him, obviously, and then proceeds to take Woody with him instead. Then, when Andy and his family stop at the gas station, Buzz appears and starts a fight with Woody. But as they fight, Andy's family drive away and leave them behind. But The two toys then manage to get into a Pizza Planet truck and arrive at the place anyway. And so, when they enter, Woody sees Andy and wants to get back to him, but Buzz sees a spaceship and wants to use it to go back where he lives. Supposedly, Woody tries to convince him otherwise, but they end up in the spaceship anyway, which is a claw machine full of alien toys.
Oh my god!
Then, Sid, the dangerous kid, uses the claw machine and takes both of them alongside a random cute alien. They end up at Sid's place and they find Sid's modified toys. At first, they thought they were cannibals and were scared of them.
They're cannibals.
A day goes by and they experience Sid's sadistic way to play with his toys. They try to escape the house, but that dog prevents them from doing so. They become separated and Buzz ends up in front of a TV that shows an ad about Buzz Lightyear, a space ranger. Then he gets a reality check and tries to fly out from a window, but he miserably fails and breaks an arm. This is where he gets his depressive arc. Then Woody finds him in Sid's sister's room and tries to convince him to get out of the house with him, but Buzz doesn't seem to show much interest. Woody then wants the attention of Woody's toys from Sid's room main window, but they refuse to help him because they think he killed Buzz. Then Sid comes back in the room and puts a rocket on Buzz that will explode the next day. He then puts an alarm to wake him up the very next morning. And so, during the next morning, Woody, as he is trapped, and Buzz have a discussion about their importance in Andy's life and how they should go back to his house. So, Woody gets Buzz out of his depression arc and he tries to save Woody from the trap he's in. But Sid's alarm goes on and he wakes up. It's time for Buzz to go boom boom. But right before that happens, Woody finds out that Sid's toys are not cannibals and that they are just trying to help other toys from their miserable fate. They then go save Buzz by traumatizing Sid.
Give him that hawk toy.
But as Buzz and Woody try to get back to Andy's house, they find out that they are moving out as we speak. So, after many attempts of catching up with the moving vehicle, they finally end up in it by using Buzz's rocket attached to his back. Then we get a conclusion in their new home on Christmas, where we relive the gift scene from earlier in the movie, but during Christmas, and with Buzz included in the toy game. So that's a resume of the movie. Now let's examine the aspects of this movie. Let's start with the plot. Not gonna lie, as much as I love this movie, I have to give the plot a 3 stars. It's really a fine story, but it's not incredible. It's a pretty basic story, but it has a really nice concept. Toys being alive. It's really original, but the plot itself is just not good enough to make a good movie, you know? It was carried by its concept. Now, what about the usage of its characters? Well, I will give this aspect a 5 star. All of the important characters had a purpose to the story, especially Woody and Buzz. We followed their story throughout the movie, and they are the main reason why this movie exists. The side characters, most precisely the toy gang, also had an impact on the story because they all brought a perspective on Woody's actions. They all said to Woody's face what they thought of his actions and questioned the morality of his presence with them after committing these actions.
You don't think I meant to knock Buzz out the window, do you, Potato Head?
That's Mr. Potato Head to you
The antagonist, Sid, actually is a menace to the characters and is threatening to their journey. Yes, he could have been better used, but he served his purpose well enough. Same goes with Andy. He is the reaching goal of our hero's journey, mostly for Woody. He's the reason why Woody wants to get back with the toy gang, because he is attached to his owner. Now, what about the world surrounding the story? Well, I'll give this one a 4 star. Here's why. I feel like the world of being a toy was not clear enough, if you get me. Like, when the movie starts, all of the toys are conscious of being toys, but Buzz was not. He was convinced of being a space ranger, and that kind of confused me. It's not something that will make you question the whole movie though. The movie still makes sense despite some of its missing details surrounding its world. Like, we don't really understand some toys rules. In my opinion, we just watch the toys adapt to certain situations, like when a human is nearby versus when an animal is nearby. You don't have to explicitly say the rules, just using some of that show don't tell works out pretty fine. And that's exactly what they did. But I think they kind of could have pushed a little bit more this aspect. Now, what about the meaning behind the story? What does it want the viewer to get from it? Well, here's my understanding of the movie. It's about change and adaptation. When you grow older, things will change. And in Andy's case, he needed something new. A new toy to play with, which is Buzz. But Woody was jealous of him in the beginning and didn't understand that. But at the end, he accepted this fact and lived well with it. In my opinion, that's what the movie was trying to tell us. Life changes as you grow. It's normal to want something new, something more fresh. And for that, I will give this aspect a 5 stars. This message really talked to me. Now, what about the continuity of the story? For this one, I will give it a 4 star. There are some small details that made the continuity questionable, in my opinion. For example, why does Buzz act like a toy even if he doesn't believe to be one?
We're all very impressed with Andy's new toy.
Toy?
T-O-Y. Toy.
Excuse me, I think the word you're searching for is Space Ranger.
Baby, you got something in your nose.
Like, it's some small incoherences like that for me that prevents me from giving this aspect a 5 stars. Sure, it helps the story to be better, but when I find myself questioning some details during my watch time, this is where I think it's wrong. Now, what about the mastery of the genre? Well, this movie understands pretty much how an animated comedic child movie works, so it's an easy 5 stars for me. With no explanations needed, it's a goofy movie, but it excels in that, in a good way. Even with some adult humor references from time to time.
What do you say I get someone else to watch the sheep tonight?
Hell yeah.
Now, let's talk more about the characters. How did I find the voice actors' performances? Well, pardon me for what I'm about to say, but Tom Hanks and Tim Allen are really good at portraying their character. I believed it throughout the whole movie, but I feel like sometimes it could have felt more natural, let's say. Like, obviously, voice actors read text, but I did really feel somehow that they were reading too much their text without giving it like a natural reader feel, if you understand what I'm trying to say. But yes, overall, their performance was really good, but I felt too much the reading their text part. And it didn't really feel like natural acting for me. But I also might be wrong, and for that I apologize if I offended anyone. So I'm giving it a 4 stars. Now, what about character development? For me, it's a 5 stars. Woody started as a jealous, narcissist, and egocentric toy that enjoyed being the most valued toy in Andy's heart. At the start of the movie, you don't necessarily like him because of his actions against Buzz, but as the movie goes on, you can see his redemption coming alongside. When he discussed with Buzz in Sid's room, when he was trapped, you could really feel how genuine he was with him. His perspective on the situation changed, and he wanted to get back to Andy with Buzz because he understood and accepted that Buzz is more valuable in Andy's heart right now. He wasn't jealous anymore, he was understanding. And for Buzz's development, he started as a delusional space ranger that had his whole world destroyed by one ad. He had his depression arc where he questioned the purpose of his existence. After that discussion he had with Woody, he then turned around his depression and was motivated to get back to Andy because he understood that being there for Andy was his purpose. It's such a good development, and for both characters, in my opinion. Unfortunately, I believe that there wasn't any other characters with as much as a great development like Woody and Buzz had, and I think it's fine because the movie wasn't centered around the other characters, you know? Even though they didn't have development, they still had a purpose to the movie, you know, to the story of the movie. Now, what about the diversified catalog of characters? I'll give it a 5 stars. Every character in this movie is different. That applies to their personalities, to their viewing of certain situations, etc. They all had something different to say and they all looked pretty different from one another, so it helped uniquify them. Now, what about character motives? I'll give this aspect a 4 star. They don't really have groundbreaking motives. Woody wants to get back to Andy and Buzz wanted to get back to his planet, then to Andy. It's simple as that. So I am not gonna give it a 5 star. It's just pretty good for the story itself. Sid is evil, just for the purpose of being evil, no backgrounds, motives, or anything else. It's just simple as that. Now, what about the relations between the characters? Well, I also give this aspect a 4 star. The toy gang has a strong connection because they're all toys of a single individual. They lived together for a long time, so they have a pretty good relation, but it is not as developed as it could have been. We have, for example, some characters that are more connected to Woody than others, like Slinky or Bo Beep, but we don't know why they like him so much, you know?
You gotta believe me.
We believe ya, Woody. Right, Rex?
Honestly, giving so much background stories is not essential at all in this movie. I'm just saying that there could have been an explanation to this attachment towards Woody, like a better romance or a better friendship. Also, Woody and Buzz's friendship development is really complicated, and sometimes I'm wondering how they still like each other after all they went through together, you know? But their character grew as their friendship grew alongside, and I'm fine with it. It's just kind of difficult to understand how they went from enemies to friends, you know? Now, what about the dialogues? Well, it's a kid movie, you know? They did fine. I'm not gonna give it a 5 star nor a 4 star. Even if some of the lines are legendary, I'll give it a 3 stars. Just because it's not incredible developed dialogues, it's just good enough for this type of movie, you know? Sorry to disappoint y'all. Now, let's talk more about the visuals. What did I think of the use of lightning? Well, it's a computer-generated 3D animation movie, you know, released in 1995, right? So it wasn't incredible. There's not a lot to say about it. They didn't play with the light like an RL movie would. For me, it's just 3 stars. Nothing groundbreaking. What about the usage of frame? Well, it's not my type of cinematic movie. You know, to be honest, it didn't look really great, but it's not terrible either. Like I said around 5 times already, it's a computer-generated 3D animated movie, you know, released in 1995. Of course, it's not the best looking film ever, but sadly, I believe they could have done a better job at that, even if the technology wasn't quite great. So I'll give a 3 stars for the usage of frame. What about color grading? Well, for me, it's a 3 stars. Nothing really impressed me with the usage of colors in this movie. It's just good enough. It's quite colorful, yes, but I didn't enjoy the way they used the colors. Now, what about production design? Well, because it's all computer generated and the technology wasn't really there yet, I'll have to give it a 2 stars. A lot of things were reused and duplicated, and sometimes it felt kind of empty. Buildings, textures, furnitures, they didn't look that incredible, to be honest. Now, what about the CGI and the animation overall? I have to put these 2 aspects together for this franchise because it's all animated. From today's perspective, this movie made in 1995 looks kind of bad, but when it came out, it was revolutionary, so I'm going to be in middle ground here and say that it is a 4 star. Now, let's talk about sound. What did I think of the sound design? Honestly, I have to give it a 3 star. The biggest thing, in my opinion, that is missing in this sound design is ambience. All the sounds in this movie are either voices, SFX, or music. I didn't quite hear any ambience, to be honest, but I have to admit they were pretty restrained. Making ambience in a room is quite hard. Also, sometimes I feel like there could have been more SFX used to make scenes more immersive, like more movements coming from toys, you know? But anyways, that's just my opinion. What about the music? Easy 5 stars. Do I have to say more? These songs are literal classics. Shout out to Randy Newman. Let's move to the final category, the editing. How was the pacing? Well, honestly, it was pretty good. Slow enough for the characters to interact with each other and fast enough for the action sequences to not feel long and boring. 5 stars. What about the cuts and transitions? Well, I've seen some weird cuts from time to time. Like there was one where we just saw Bo Beep not moving for like 2 seconds. And I was like, what was that? They could have framed it better or just not put it in the final cut, but anyways. And sometimes there were nice transitions, like the fade from Sid's t-shirt to his house, which just demonstrates that the devil is inside this house. So I'll have to give it a 4 stars. It was not groundbreaking editing, it was just great in the majority of the movie. Now let's talk about bonus points. What massive W's came out from this movie? So first of all, the music. For me, it's so special. It is so unique and recognizable and so good. Second of all, so many memes came out of this movie, but it shouldn't affect my rating of this movie, you know? So I'll just give a bonus point to legendary scenes, you know? Third of all, it was revolutionizing at the time it released. It paved the way for future animated movie, you know? Finally, they used some throwbacks from previous scenes to make the story move forward, which gives a purpose to these previous scenes, you know? Like the torching with the lens or Buzz flying at the end. Now, what penalties will I give? I only see one mistake in this movie, and it's his realism. And no, I'm not talking about the realism in the sense that toys come to life. I'm talking about some of these aspects of these toys, you know? Like, they are strong enough to throw away cables from one window to another, but they can't push a crate with a toolbox on it. Or when Woody imitated Sid's mom voice, and I don't know how the fuck his sister thought it was her mom, you know? Because Woody did not sound at all like her mother, you know?
Hannah! Oh, Hannah!
Mom?
Sometimes I feel like some details were just there to make the story more in favor of the writers or just give it more comedic purposes. And it's a good thing, but sometimes I find myself questioning realism, and that's something that I don't want necessarily to happen, you know? So minus 1%. It's not big enough to make me question my liking of the overall movie though. And so that brings us to the final note I give to Toy Story. And that gives us a great 81%. Now, let's move on to the next movie of this franchise, which is Toy Story 2, released on November 13, 1999. 4 years after its predecessor. Its running time is 92 minutes, so 1 hour and 32 minutes. Here's a resume of the movie. We start up with Buzz, who is on a mission to infiltrate Emperor Zurg's base. We see him use his Space Ranger's abilities, and we have a look at his special belt, which makes him defeat gravity. He ends up confronting Zurg and dies. We realize that it was all in a video game and that it was Rex controlling him. We then learn that Andy is going away to a cowboy camp and he wants to bring Woody with him, but as he plays one last time with his toys before going to the camp, he ends up ripping a little bit Woody's arm, and he then doesn't want to bring him anymore because of it. So Woody ends up being abandoned, left on the top shelf. He then sees Wheezy, another toy that ended up being broken and left on the same top shelf way before Woody did. But then, Andy's mom makes a yard sale and she decides to put Wheezy in a 25-cent box. But Woody doesn't want to abandon him and goes to his rescue with the help of Buster, Andy's dog. As he retrieves him, he falls off Buster and is being taken by a man who seems to be excited to see him. He wants to buy him off, but Andy's mom refuses. But instead of letting go, he stole Woody and drove away, all under the toy gang's eyes. They find out that the man who stole Woody is Al from Al's Toy Barn. And so, some of them decide to go rescue Woody. Al brings Woody to his apartment, where he keeps a collection of merchandise from a TV show called Woody's Roundup. This collection includes 3 toys: Jessie, Bullseye, and Pete. They show Woody how big of a legend he is by showing him some television episodes and some Woody merchandise. Ironic of Disney to do, promoting merchandise, LMAO. Later, Woody gets a restoration treatment by an old guy to make him look good and repair his arm, but Al wants to put him and the gang in a museum in Japan. While this happens, Buzz and the toy gang are heading towards Al's toy barn, where they find alleys full of other toys. But Buzz ends up in a confrontation with a new version of Buzz, with the belt we saw at the beginning of the movie, and ends up being replaced by the new version while he is trapped in a toy box. The rest of the toys are looking for Woody, and instead of finding him, they find Barbies. And one of these dolls decides to give them a tour of the place. In the meantime, Woody tries to escape Al's apartment while Al is asleep. But somebody woke him up by turning the TV on with full sound on. So, Woody failed to escape and accused Jessie of being the one who turned the TV on, but she denies. We also get a tragic background story about how Jessie was once somebody's toy, just like Woody is to Andy. But she ended up getting replaced by teenagers' activities and she got left in a donation box. And so, we get her perspective on Woody's situation, where she tells him that one day the same will happen to him and that he would be better in Japan with them being contemplated by kids behind glass. In the meantime, the toy gang follows Al from his office to his apartment, and they end up getting also followed by our real Buzz, as well as Emperor Zurg. They go through vents that lead to the elevator and they end up in Al's apartment, where they find Woody. They are trying to rescue him, and our Buzz shows up, showing to the gang that the new Buzz is not him. Woody then tells the gang that he wants to go to Japan with the new toys he just met, and so the good old toy gang leave him there. But suddenly, Woody changes his mind. But Pete doesn't let him leave, and Al gets in the apartment, taking his toys collection with him on his way to the airport. Then, on top of the elevator, we get a confrontation between the new Buzz and Emperor Zurg, where they fight, and it gets revealed that Zurg was Buzz's father all along. A Star Wars reference, by the way.
You killed my father!
No, Buzz. I am your father.
Then, the gang steals a Pizza Planet truck to go to the airport and help Woody. When they arrive, they find so many different suitcases and a couple of similars to the ones where Woody is being held in. Then, they find the right suitcase and save Woody from Pete. Pete then ends up being taken by a young girl to be her newest toy. Woody then tries to also save Bullseye and Jessie, but Jessie ends up being dragged into a plane. Woody and Buzz then rides Bullseye to rescue Jessie, and Woody ends up in the plane. He convinces Jessie that Andy or his sister will take her as their new toy and leaves the plane in a courageous way.
Besides, he's got a little sister.
Then, the movie ends up back in Andy's room, where his toys welcome him back in their own way, and he meets his new toys, Bullseye and Jessie. Then, the movie ends on a musical tone with Wheezy singing the infamous song You've Got a Friend in Me. So, that's a resume of the movie. Now, let's examine the aspects of this movie. Let's start with the plot. I would give this movie's plot a 3 stars. You see, the movie's story is not bad. It's just a little fun adventure, nothing groundbreaking. It's a kid's movie. I don't expect something life-changing, as long as the plot is not bad. And in this movie, it passed the vibe check. A little repetitive with the toys always being in some kind of undercover mission, but still fun enough. Now, what about the usage of its characters? Well, I'll give this movie a 4 stars on that aspect. You see, the main protagonist of this movie is Woody, and the story is mostly centered about him and his discovery about himself. The story introduced new characters that gave Woody new perspective on himself and also on his world. Jessie showed him that he is a special relic and that he won't be Andy's toy forever. Buzz and the toy gang were used to make Woody see how important he is in Andy's eyes, especially Buzz. So, the usage of the characters were pretty much fun for feeding ideas to Woody and making him decide stuff. They don't all impact the story as a whole, but most of them do, even if they could have had more impact on the story if it wasn't mostly about Woody. Now, what about the world surrounding the story? Well, I'll give it a 4 stars. The world surrounding this story is pretty much ours. The toys live while we look away. It's that simple. Why I give this aspect a 4 stars is because, like in the previous movie, sometimes the rules of being a toy seem to miss some clarifications. These clarifications should have been made in the first movie, but the writers just surfed with it and went along with it. They continued the narrative that every boy's Lightyear doesn't know that they are toys. For example, they just accepted these missing details and we, as the viewer, accepted it too, so I don't really see a problem with it anymore. Sometimes you question some stuff, like why did they put an ad of a sad all on television at the end of the movie?
I just want to send out prayers to the ones that was lost last night.
Are you serious, my brother?
Well, I guess crime doesn't pay.
Like, in real life, this wouldn't happen. But we move on from these thoughts because it's not that important to the story's integrity. Now, what about the meaning behind this movie? Well, in my opinion, the message this movie is trying to tell us is pretty much the same as the first one, but told in a different way. In this sequel, it's more about everything coming to an end someday. Life changes as you grow, but some things will also end when you grow up. Like playing with your toys. You just have to enjoy it while it lasts. And this is what Woody is going to learn throughout this movie. So I'll give it a 5 stars. Because it's another message that really talks to me. Like Andy's mom said, toys don't last forever. And I like how this line said in the beginning of the movie resumes the message of the entire movie. In the scene where Woody gets all cleaned up, we can see the old guy painting over Andy's name under Woody's boot, which represents that the past is hiding behind all that painting. And when Woody scratches it off, it represents the sudden change of mind he gets when wanting to go back to Andy's house. I like how they use that metaphor. Now, what about the continuity of the story? Well, the story almost makes sense to me. I only see one flaw. How did Jessie not see Pete open the television and put the controller right in front of her?
What is your problem?
What? You think I did that?
Well, if the boot fits.
Say that.
If the boot fits.
This little detail, in my opinion, could have changed the whole movie, in my opinion, making Woody deaf to Pete's advice. This, sadly, is the only detail that makes me go from a 5 stars to a 4 stars on this aspect. I'm sorry, y'all. To be fair, it's also a nice continuity to the first movie, where we end up with a dog joining Andy's family, and the movie also starts with the dog entering Andy's room. We also have the appearance of Miss Potato, who also was revealed in the final scene of the previous movie. They also used Al's Toy Barn, which appeared in the first movie. So they followed up on their previous installment, and I believe it's a good thing. And it helps the continuity of the franchise. Now, what about the mastery of the genre? Well, they mixed a lot of elements from different genres into this movie, like comedic humor, action sequences, and suspenseful moments. In my opinion, they have done it pretty well, and I love the effort they have put into it. So I'll give them a 5 stars on this aspect. They went a little more softly on the more adult humor on this one while keeping its charm. Now, let's talk more about the characters. How did I find the voice actors' performances? Well, it was pretty nice overall. In my opinion, they did step up a little bit from their previous performance in the first movie. And the new voices added in this one works pretty great. I especially love Jessie's voice portrayal by Mary Kay Bergman, with that little accent she does.
Get.
5 stars. The voice actors were really believable, even in the more emotional scenes. Now, what about character development? Well, to be honest, I am really going to hate what I'm about to say. But in this movie, the character development was not it. I'll give it a 3 stars, and here's why. The only characters I have witnessed evolve in this movie is Woody and Jessie, and I would not even consider it to be an evolution for Woody. In his case, he started the movie by wanting to be with Andy. Then, he saw his potential elsewhere. And he then finally went back on his thoughts and wanted to be with Andy again. He learned some stuff from his time at Al's apartment, yes, but to be honest, I don't feel like it's groundbreaking stuff for the franchise as a whole. It's just important for this movie and won't ever be used again. Jesse, on the other hand, started the movie believing that a child will always leave you behind someday and didn't want to live that ever again. But when she met Woody, he told her how important she could be to Andy if she just came with him and the rest of the toy gang, which she ended up doing. It's a really nice evolution for a really nice character, in my opinion, and pretty much the only important one to talk about. Like, are we even going to spend 20 minutes talking about how Rex got killed by Zurg in a video game in the beginning of the movie and ends up pushing him off the elevator later in the movie? Like, no, it's not an interesting character development. It's just a nice throwback for comedic purposes.
Prepare to die.
Ah, I can't look.
Can't be that easy.
Did it? I finally defeated Zurg!
It's that easy.
Talking about Rex, why is he always the one causing trouble? Like, make him do smart stuff for once, you know? That would be an interesting development for him. And it's sad, in my opinion, that we haven't seen an interesting development for Buzz. Like, to be honest, he was only important for Woody's journey and not even for his own journey, you know? Anyways, that's why I'm giving this aspect a 3 stars. Now, what about the diversified catalog of characters? Well, I'll give this one a 4 stars. All the characters of this show have one thing in common, and it's their appreciation of Woody. For some reason, every important character loves Woody. Even the antagonists. There's 2 reasons why he's being loved. The first one being that he is the Toys gang's friend, and the second being that he is popular amongst the Woody's Roundup gang. I believe that this movie kind of misses a diversification of points of views towards Woody, but that's just my opinion. If we talked about personalities though, they're all pretty different. That's why I'm giving this aspect a 4 stars. One thing in my opinion this movie suffers from is its antagonists. We have 3 of them. The first one being Al, the second being Pete, and finally Zurg. Al is such an unlikable character. He's the stereotype of a Reddit mod. He's a greedy guy that only wants his own benefits, and he's ready to do some nasty stuff to get it. I don't like when an antagonist is all bad, you know? To me, it just says that the writers didn't want to write an antagonist with deep motives or more personalities. That's just my opinion again. So honestly, I did not like Al as an antagonist. Pete is also, in my opinion, a bad plot twist villain. He's as selfish as Al, but he hides it from the gang for the entire plot. When his true self gets revealed, he doesn't seem that menacing, and that gets proven in the airport scene. He only was there to cause trouble for 15 minutes and was easily defeated by the toy gang.
Fine!
Finally, Zurg was a villain only for Buzz, and he was not menacing at the end of the day, because he was just there for comedic purposes. Now, what about character motives? Well, the motives are pretty understandable, and they bring a dilemma. Should Woody go back to Andy and be with him for a short period of time, or should he go to Japan with the new toys he just met and be contemplated for the rest of his life? Each character involved in one of these points of view has valuable motives, and throughout the movie, we watch Woody's perception evolve on this matter, and it makes the movie easily understandable in regards to this aspect. Pete is also pretty good at manipulating Woody for his own interests, making Woody question his future with Andy and all. So I'll give motives a 5 stars. Now, what about the relations between the characters? Well, the whole movie is about the characters' relations with Woody, and it's pretty well described, so it's an easy 5 stars for this aspect. Now, what about the dialogues? To be honest, none of them really stuck out for me. It's a kid movie, you know? I wasn't expecting to be impressed by the dialogues. They are just fine for the type of movie they're in. They are better than the first movie though, so I'll give it a 4 star. Now, let's talk more about visuals. What did I think of the use of lightning in this movie? Well, in this movie, they really stood up from its predecessor in that aspect, in my opinion. I love the way they used lights in some scenes, like when Woody is getting cleaned up by that old guy and when Woody discovers all of his merchandise. The outdoors lighting didn't really get better, let's say, in my opinion, but it still looked good enough. I'll give it a 4 stars. What about the usage of frame? Again, big step up. I like the fact that they use closer framing for the more emotional scenes, unlike in the first movie where their shots were pretty much all wide and stuff. So for that, let's give them a 4 stars. What about color grading? It looked pretty okay, not gonna lie. The color grading used in Jesse's background story was pretty unique. It was nice. And in the other scenes, it looked mostly natural, but it also was a step up from the previous movies, so I'll give them a 4 stars on this one too. Now, what about the production design? Well, I liked it. I liked the look they gave Woody's merchandise and the alleys inside of Al's Toy Barn. Let's give it a 4 stars. One thing I find over the top though is the look they gave to Woody's Roundup TV show, you know? So many cables. It looked just weird. How was the CGI and the animation overall? Well, because it was released in 1999, and if we compare this movie to the other animated movies in the same year, let's just say that it looks amazing, and they really stood up from the previous movie's CGI look. Let's give them a 5 stars. There have been some mistakes, obviously, but it wasn't groundbreaking mistakes. I was still pretty impressed by the CGI made during that time. Now, let's talk about sound. What did I think of the sound design? Well, it sounds really better than the first movie, even though it's kind of the same formula with SFX used, with the score playing in the background. They added more ambient sound though, so it's a good step up towards perfection. One of my favorite scenes, sound-wise, was the Cheetos scene where Woody is trying to not wake all up. When he steps on the Cheetos, the sound is so loud because in Woody's perspective, Cheetos are big and loud obstacles. It really helped to make the scene more suspenseful. Let's give the sound design a 4 stars. I also have noticed so many Star Wars SFX used in this movie, which is a fun touch, in reference to one of my favorite franchises of all time. Now, what about the music? Again, easy 5 stars. Some of my favorite ones are the ones playing during Jesse's background story, the airport chase scene, Woody's cleaning scene, and Woody's Roundup song. Let's move on to the final category, the editing. How was the pacing? Honestly, it was greatly paced, in my opinion. At no moment did I think that it was going too slow or too fast. 5 stars. What about the cuts and transitions? Again, I have seen no questionable cuts or transitions, honestly, so I'll also give them a 5 stars on this one. Now, let's talk about bonus points. What massive W's came out of this movie? Firstly, I believe that adding Jessie in the franchise was really awesome. She's, in my opinion, the second most valuable character of this movie. The first one being Woody. She adds a really nice point of view to this movie about the use of toys. She shows with her experience that once children stops playing with you, you get thrown away. I really like that fun and excited attitude that she brings with her traumatic past. She's a really good character and she brings some nice energy to this movie. Secondly, the fake bloopers they put in the credits was a really fun touch. I liked it. It made me stay through the credits, just like a Marvel movie does. So it's a nice little ad. Thirdly, I also want to give a bonus point because of how infamous the music of this movie became. It's so goddamn good, and I love it so much. I also want to give a bonus point because they managed to create some infamous scenes, like Woody's cleaning process, Woody's nightmare, or Jesse's background story. Now, what penalties will I give? The first one will be about its antagonists. They are not good, in my opinion, so minus 3%. It kind of impacts my overall liking of the movie and the story because I find it tragic that they tried to implement villains that didn't work out that great, you know? In my opinion, they failed to create greatly written antagonists in this sequel. Also, I will subtract another 1% because I found some of the toy gang scenes to be boring. When they are walking towards Al's toy barn, I find it quite useless and just there to create some suspense. Like, yes, it makes the viewer understand how they crossed the whole street without dying, for example, but I personally found it quite boring. but that's just my opinion. Also, the movie is quite repetitive with the scenes from the toy gang looking for Woody and Woody being in Oz's apartment. I feel like there's not enough diversity in these scenes, but honestly, it's just a weird thought that I have without any real evidence to back it up, you know? This one's all my fault, to be fair, but I'll still subtract 1% nevertheless. And so that brings us to the final note I give to Toy Story 2, and that gives us a really good 85%. To be honest, I am actually surprised by this. I thought at first that I liked the first movie more, but turns out I prefer its sequel by 4%. I am actually surprised that it has that big of a score. Something might be wrong for sure. Well, anyways, let's move on to the next one before I start overthinking about this. Toy Story 3 was released officially on June 18, 2010, 11 years after its predecessor. Its runtime is 103 minutes, so 1 hour and 43 minutes. Here's a resume of the movie. The movie starts with a train robbery sequence where we see our beloved characters play roles such as sheriffs, robbers, heroes, villains, etc. It's actually just Andy making up stories while playing with his toys. Then we get to see some camera footage of Andy having fun with his toys. Then we jump ahead a few years later. Andy is about to go to college. He is old now. He hasn't played with his toys for years now, and the toys gang misses these times when they had fun. Andy's mom is asking him and his sister to sort their toys to decide which goes in the attic, which goes in the trash, which goes to donation, and which they keep. Molly, Andy's sister, puts her Barbie and some other toys in the donation box that will go to Sunnyside Daycare. Andy decides to put most of his toys in the attic, but he uses a trash bag to collect his toys. The only toy he decides to bring to college with him is Woody. But his mom confuses the trash bag for a real trash bag and puts it outside to be collected by the trash collector. Woody tries to save his friends, but they manage to save themselves. They can't believe what Andy did because they think he purposely put them in the trash bag to go in the trash. Woody tries to tell them that they were supposed to go into the attic, but they don't believe him. So they decide to join Barbie and go play with kids at the Sunnyside Daycare. When they arrive, they meet a lot of other toys and see this place as paradise, but they'll soon find out that it is not.
Oh, I want to get played with. Why can't time go faster?
They meet Lotso, the supposedly main figure of this place. He shows them the entire place and where they will stay. Then, when he and his team leaves, Woody tries one last time to convince the toy gang to go with him back to Andy's place, but they all refuse. So, he escapes alone. He ends up in the tree where Bonnie, a kid from the daycare, finds him and brings him to her place. He then gets played with alongside Bonnie's other toys, while the toy gang in Sunnyside get abused by kids. It was not the paradise they thought it would be. Then, they send Buzz on an adventure to find Lotso and try to convince him to put them in the other classroom where all the toys don't get abused by the nice kids. But he ends up in some kind of gambling room where toys gamble Monopoly money and he gets kidnapped. He ends up in a book room where he tries to convince Lotso to put him and his friends in the nice kids room, but Lotso only wants Buzz in that class. But Buzz refuses to go along.
But I can't accept. We're a family. We stay together.
Family man, huh? I understand.
Are you up for being pegged?
So, Lotso reprograms Buzz to be on his side. When he gets back to his friends, he captures them and they will all end up in jail cells. In the meantime, Woody tries to find Andy's address on the internet. When he does find it, before leaving, he hears the story of a sad clown who knew Lotso and he shares his backstory. Lotso was forgotten by his kids and got replaced. Something then snapped inside of him and he ended up at Sunnyside where he took over over the place. Woody, after hearing this story, understands that his friends are in danger and that he has to save them. When he goes back to Sunnyside, he meets a telephone toy that informs him of how it works at Sunnyside at night, so he can make a plan and escape with his friends. Woody then creates a plan with the toy gang to bring Buzz back to his normal state and escape the daycare to go back to Andy's house. Something I forgot to mention is that at some point before, Miss Potato Head saw Andy looking out for them with her missing eye, and they finally believed what Woody was trying to tell them. Okay, so go back where we left off. The night arrives and the plan starts. Every character does their own thing to help the plan move forward, and they end up trying to bring Buzz back to his normal state, but instead of doing that, they accidentally push the Spanish mode and Buzz starts to speak Spanish and acts all romantic for Jessie. As they try to escape through the trash containers, they end up facing Lotso and his crew. They then try to convince them to let them go, and Woody goes all savage mode on Lotso, talking about his old kid. Then Big Baby has heard enough and takes Lotso and throws him in the trash container. As the toy gang tries to escape, Lotso somehow manages to pull Woody through the container with him, and the rest of the gang goes inside to try to save him, except Barbie, who was held up by Ken. When they arrive at the dumpster, Buzz saves Jessie and gets reset back to his normal state. As they end up making their way to what they at first thought was the exit, Woody helps Lotso, for whatever reason, to escape with them. But when they arrive at what they thought was the exit, they face hell. Lotso was about to help them by stopping the rolling mechanism, but he then selfishly ran away. So, as our characters face death, they get saved by a giant claw, controlled by their 3 green alien friends. They finally escaped this dumpster, literally. Lotso ends up getting taken by a guy working there and attached to his bumper. The toy gang then gets back at Andy's place, wash up and hide in the attic box. Woody hides in the college box, but then he suddenly has a change of mind. He writes Bonnie's address on a sticky note and puts it on the attic box. Then Andy drives to Bonnie's place, where he shows her his toys that he wants to give her. When Bonnie saw Woody in the box, she recognized him and wanted him, but Andy seemed to refuse at first, but he suddenly changed his mind and decided to give him to her anyway. They then play together for one last time with his toys, and Andy drives away after looking at his toys for one last time. So that's a resume of the movie. Now, let's examine the aspects of this movie. Let's start with the plot. I will give the plot a 5-star. I feel like this movie actually had a good story, in contrast to its 2 predecessors. What carried the movie, in my opinion, was its concept. Making toys alive in our world is such an original concept, and I love it. But the story itself isn't that incredible, it's just pretty simple. In the sequel, the story is more of a little adventure where Woody discovers himself with not much impact to the Toy Story universe, let's say. But in the third movie, I believe the stakes are higher. The story actually has a big impact on our characters, and it is pretty fun and exciting to watch. I like the concept of putting our characters in a daycare where they confront plenty of new toys and also get played with by different types of kids. The plot of this movie in general is really fun, and I like the way our characters discover Sunnyside's secrets. Now, what about the usage of its characters? Again, a pretty nice 5 stars. I feel like this movie has surpassed its predecessors in that aspect, because in this third movie, each character had an importance to the plot and was used correctly. I don't think I need to explain why Woody and Buzz were greatly used, but let's talk about the side characters. Each member of the toy gang brought something in the story that made the plot move forward, and the biggest example of that is the escaping scene. Each character was shown doing something to help the toy gang escape jail. In the second movie, I believe that the side characters were there more for comedic purposes, while in the third movie, they actually do something to make the story move forward, and that's why I give this aspect of 5 stars. Also, the new characters could have been better used in my opinion, but honestly, I don't really mind it. They weren't the biggest stars of the movie anyways. They greatly used Ken, Barbie, Lotso, and Big Baby though, but the rest of the new characters could have had a better use for the story. Also, the way they introduce Bonnie with her playing with her toys in a similar way to Andy makes you appreciate her character more, and when the end of the movie starts, you don't feel like giving Andy's toys to her is a robbery, because you know, as the viewer, that she will take good care of these toys. No! Now, what about the world surrounding the story? Let's give them a 4-star. They do show how Sunnyside works greatly, but I feel like it could have been somewhat more developed. We just get the way it works from the eyes of our main characters from the toy gang. The new toys from Sunnyside were portrayed as just evil figures following the dictatorship of Lotso, but I feel like they could have added informations to make us, the viewers, understand better the reasons why they praise Lotso so much. That might be a little too much to add, but I believe it could have helped us understand more a side of Sunnyside that we don't really know about. Like, how did Lotso end up in power? Or why do these characters follow his dictatorship? Anyways, that's why I would give this aspect a 4 stars. I also like the more political approach they gave to Sunnyside with its corruption through the boys club, if we can call him that. It's some kind of parody of our society, and I find it nice how they approached it. Now, what about the meaning behind this movie? To me, the movie is about moving on. The way I see it, while the sequel is, to me, about everything has an end, in the third movie, after accepting something ending, you have to move on to new things. In this movie, the toys are figuring out what their future will be after Andy's leaving. To me, this movie's message is, as usual, a 5 stars. Like the previous movies, the meaning behind it really speaks to me and I like it a lot. Now, what about the continuity of the story? Well, I'm trying really hard to think about something that makes the continuity questionable in this movie, but I don't seem to find anything, so 5 stars. There's one thing though at the beginning of the movie where I believe it was Rex asking what a daycare is, and later he seemed to know what it was, but I'm not sure about that.
What's daycare?
We have a plan.
We're going to daycare!
Also, the demo mode on Buzz seems to be the explanation of why he always acts like a space ranger. So that clears up some questions I had about the first movies. There's also one thing that I will mention later in the penalties, but you'll see later. Now, what about the mastery of the genre? As usual, Pixar shows us how great they are at making animated movies for kids. This movie had less of a comedic tone, but more of an emotional tone. They really nailed both tones though. I laughed and cried throughout the whole movie, literally. They also did put a lot of suspense during the movie, especially during the escape from the jail scene. And I believe they nailed this one too, so 5 stars. Now, let's talk more about the characters. How did I find the voice actors' performances? I honestly believe that every voice actor used during this movie did an excellent job at portraying their characters. They were 100% believable, and they also nailed the emotional scenes, so big ups for that, 5 stars. Now, what about character development? Well, to be honest, I don't really see any characters having that big of a development. Woody probably had the biggest development out of them all though. He started wanting to be with Andy in college, but he ended up wanting to be with his toys friends more. This whole movie made him closer to them, and he finally accepted that he needs to move on from Andy and pass the torch to Bonnie. Apart from that, this movie kind of lacks character development. The toy gang pretty much went from denying what Woody was claiming to accepting it because of Miss Potato's missing eye. Buzz had a lot going on, yes, but I don't believe it to be considered as real development. I believe it was more for comedic purposes and not making him understand stuff. This whole evil in Spanish arc is not what I considered to be development. I'm sorry for what I'm about to say, but this aspect deserves a 2 stars. Ouch. Another thing that could have helped this aspect is Lotso. He was once a nice toy, just like them, but in the end, he decided to stay evil, and that decision would almost kill our characters. I'm glad he didn't help them though, because it created such an emotional scene that I love deeply. But from another perspective, I wish he could have had some kind of redemption, because it could have had more interesting character development, which this movie lacks, in my opinion. Now, what about the diversified catalog of characters? This movie had a lot of diversity of characters. From the usual toy gang to the new set of toys from Sunnyside to Bonnie's Toys. They are pretty different from each other and bring something different to the table, so 5 stars. Now, what about character motives? It is easily understandable why this movie's characters do what they do. Woody wants to get back to Andy, yet again, lol. The toy gang wants to get played with after years of being left over. The evil toys wants power over Sunnyside, etc. I have no issues here, so I'll give them a 5 stars. Now, what about relations between characters? Well, the movie drives on that. Every decision made, every route taken, everything said was because the characters wanted to be with each other. Their friendship is the reason why everything happens in this movie. They all have an awesome relationship together, and the romance between Buzz and Jesse also adds something new to this franchise, which is a good thing.
Teach me how to read.
So I'll give them a 5 stars. Now, what about the dialogues? Honestly, I don't have anything to say about that really. I think they are pretty damn good for the type of movie they're in, you know? 5 stars. Now, let's talk more about the visuals. What did I think of the use of lightning? In this movie, I find the lightning so good compared to the previous movies. It looks so awesome. Even outdoors, there's a lot of playing with light rays and shadows, and that's what I expect from a great looking movie. They really did impress me there, so I'll give them a 5 stars. Now, what about the usage of frame? Honestly, it wasn't groundbreaking, it just looked pretty good. No frame was made for the purpose of impressing the audience. I believe that job was mostly done by the lighting. The frame in general was good looking, so I'll give them a 4 stars. Now, what about color grading? This movie has a lot of colors and I love it. There is no unique grading in this movie, but they use the colors really greatly. So I want to give them a 4 stars. It just looks really normal, but with a lot of colors. One thing I like though is the look they gave to both classrooms. One was more cold and the other more warm. Kind of ironic because the mood when the children are playing in the warm classroom does not represent the comfort you think there would be inside this classroom when seeing the warm colors they used, you know? Now, what about production design? Well, I really like the details they put in each classroom. It really adds to the realism of the movie. There is no detail that made me question the realism of the movie, so I'll give them a 5 stars on this one. Now, what about the CGI and the animation overall? Do I really need to explain myself here? 5 stars. Even nowadays, I still think this movie looks amazing. Now, let's talk about sound. What did I think of the sound design? In this movie, they really did better than in the previous ones. There's more SFX used to create a more realistic ambience, and it sounds really great in general. So, let's give them a 5 stars on this one, shall we? There was one time they used a vinyl scratch SFX and it catched me so off guard. I wasn't prepared for this goofy stuff.
Love your leg warmers.
Nice ass.
Come on, Ken.
Now, what about the music? Well, there are less iconic songs in this movie, in my opinion, but it's still quite amazing. The final song always makes me cry. Randy Newman created a monster of a PTSD inside of me because of that scene. Congratulations to you, Randy, because I'm giving once again 5 stars to your aspect. Let's move on to the final category, the editing. How was the pacing? I was actually surprised throughout the whole movie of how amazing the pacing is. The movie has, in my opinion, a perfect pacing. The time they used to make the viewer discover the place is enough. The suspense is really well timed, and when it feels too long, there's always a funny joke to make the wait worth it. Like when Mr. Potato Head is escaping and meeting a pigeon.
What are you looking at, Feathers?
I would like to be a terrorist.
5 stars. The fact that our characters are also pressured by Andy's leaving makes the movie more intense. You really feel the time moving on as the movie moves forward, and you feel nervous for the characters because you know that their time is short. Now, what about the cuts and transitions? The movie starts with a fire transition, literally, which looks pretty cool. And throughout the whole movie, I haven't questioned any cuts or any transitions, so it was really fine to me. So let's give them a 5 stars. Now, let's talk about bonus points. What massive W's came out from this movie? First off, I love the emotional tone the creators gave to it. We were all familiar with the comedic tone of this franchise, but the way they played with our emotions during this movie is something that makes me love this movie even more than I already love it. The dumpster scene when the toys face off hell and the scene where Andy drives away always give me tears, even after 400 times of watching it. Yes, I am a grown man. What are you gonna do about it? Next up, we got a great villain that works really well. My biggest issue with Toy Story 2 is its villains, but in this movie, they finally introduced a villain that works in the story and that actually is menacing and impactful to the story. Lotso is a great villain because, firstly, we understand his motives and where he comes from. Secondly, he actually has control over our characters and they have to work together to get out of this hole and even turn Lotso's own people against him to defeat him. Finally, he looks amazing and has a really unique personality, which is awesome. On another note, I will give a bonus point to the fun credit scenes because they are pretty fun to watch. It shows us how the toy's life is after the events of the movie and it's pretty fun to watch. Now, what penalties will I give? There is only one. The lazy explanation behind Bo Beep's and Wheezy's absence. I guess the writers didn't want to include them in this movie for some reason, but to explain their absence just by saying that they were toys that were lost throughout the years is lazy to me. They were characters introduced into the franchise 11 years prior, and they were big parts of it, especially Bo Beep, who was there since day one of Toy Story's existence, 15 years prior. I find it so sad that they weren't in the movie and that they explained it so poorly, -1%. And so that brings us to the final note I give to Toy Story 3, and that gives us a great 96%. Give a big round of applause for this movie, people. Now let's move on to the final movie of this franchise. Toy Story 4 was released on June 21st, 2019, 8 years after its predecessor. Its runtime is 100 minutes, so 1 hour and 40 minutes. Here's a resume of the movie. The movie starts years before Toy Story 3's events. RC car is stuck outside on a rainy night. Woody goes outside to his rescue, but when he does that, he sees Bo Beep getting thrown away in a box. He then tries to save her, but she tells him that it is fine and that her time here is over. And so, Woody then has to let her go. After this scene, we get some visuals of Andy playing with Woody all the way through the end of the 3rd movie, and finally, we get visuals of Bonnie playing with her toys. As she takes toys from her closet, she leaves Woody there with other toys that she hasn't touched for years, which kind of upsets Woody, obviously. Then, we learn that Bonnie has to go to kindergarten, and as she does, Woody hides in her backpack to follow her there and watch over her. At the kindergarten, Woody finds Bonnie sitting alone, and to help her, he secretly gives her some random stuff he found in the trash, so she can create a friend. She then creates the new love of her life, Forky. But you see, Forky also has loved ones in his life, which are trash cans.
I am not a toy. I'm a sport. I was made for soup, salad, maybe chili, and then the trash. I'm litter. Freedom!
He always wants to be in trash cans, and Woody tries to convince him that he is a toy. But Forky doesn't want to hear him, and we get sequences of Woody looking out for him. Later, we find out that Bonnie and her parents are going on a road trip, and so Woody watches over Forky throughout the whole ride, which makes him tired. During the night, while Bonnie sleeps, Woody tells Buzz that the voices inside of him are telling him to keep an eye on Forky, which makes Buzz curious on wanting to find out what the voices inside of him will guide him to. He then presses one of his voice buttons, which kind of creates a panic attack coming from Woody, and Forky jumps off a window.
So your inner voice advises you.
Then, Woody goes to Forky's rescue and finally convinces him that he is a toy. So, They walk for hours towards Bonnie's family's van while Woody shares Forky his background story. When they arrive at the carnival, they end up seeing Bo Beep's lantern in the front glass of an antique store, which makes Woody want to find out more about it. So, when they enter the boutique, they meet Gabby, an antique toy who wants a new voice box so she can be with her dream kid, Harmony. Her voice box is broken, and her ultimate plan is to take Woody's voice box and replace hers with his. But her plan doesn't work quite well, because Harmony ends up taking Woody on the floor and leaves the boutique with him, leaving Forky behind with Gabby. Woody then wants to rescue, once again, Forky and leaves Harmony behind. But as he does this, he finds Bo Beep, which he hasn't seen for years now, and they speak a little. While that happens, Buzz listens to his interior voices and goes to Woody's rescue.
What do we do, Buzz?
Kill yourself.
Huh? I think I have to go.
Where are you going? Why?
Should we all go? Are we going?
You should kill yourself now!
No time to explain.
Okay, what is with everyone jumping out the window?
He ends up being taken by a guy working in the carnival booth, and he becomes a game prize. There, he meets Bunny and Ducky, a toy duo who wants to beat him up for taking their place as the big prize of the booth, which they have been in for years somehow. When Buzz escapes, they run after him, and they all find themselves in the same path as Woody and Bo Beep. They all then decide to help Forky, and in the meantime, he speaks with Gabby about why she needs a new voice box. And he also gives too much information on Woody's past. While the outside toys find a way to get to Forky, the toy gang that is still in the van finds out that Bonnie's family is ready to leave, but to stop them from doing so, Jesse punctures one of the van's tires, which gives the outside toys more time to save Forky. Back in the boutique now, as they try to find a plan to save Forky, they figure out that they need more help, so Bo Beep goes to find Duke Kaboom, a Canadian stunt toy on a motorcycle who will make a jump to crash in Gabby's location. As they do, they get chased out by a cat, which leaves them outside without Forky. Woody then wants to go back inside to help him, but the rest of the toys refuse. When he gets inside, he then lets Gabby take his voice box, and he then retrieves Forky as they go hide in Bonnie's backpack, which she forgot in the store earlier, and remembered that she did because Buzz spoke out loud in the van to remind her. Forky sees Gabby trying to catch Harmony's attention, and when she did, Harmony rejected her. So, Woody went to talk to her and tried to convince her that Bonnie might take her in. So, he tells Forky to give a coordinate to Buzz and the rest of the toy gang to meet him on top of the carousel. The toy gang then tries to make the family go back to the carousel by imitating the GPS's voice, which somehow worked, and also by controlling the van's pedals, which made the police follow their van to the carnival. In the meantime, as the outside toys are making their way to the carousel, Gabby sees a lost child and decides that she will be her kid, which worked because that kid took Gabby with her. As all the toys find themselves on top of the carousel, an emotional scene arrives between Woody and the rest of the gang because Woody decides to stay with Bo Beep and be part of the Lost Toys gang. Then, both parties part ways and the movie ends. So, that's a resume of the movie. Now, let's examine the aspects of this movie. Let's start with the plot. I am going to give this aspect a 2 stars. I find the plot of this fourth movie to be kind of mid. I feel like the story didn't have anything interesting to tell and just exists to sell stuff. Some ideas are cool, like the antique store and the carnival, but it just doesn't make a great story. The writers made a road trip script, which doesn't have a good reputation, especially with the fourth movie of an already established franchise, if you know what I'm saying. The story is pretty much surrounding Forky, and to be honest, I don't like that. The story, in my opinion, is kind of empty. and the writers filled it with nostalgia and reused ideas from previous movies, like Woody being abandoned once again, just like in the second movie, or Forky denying to be a toy, just like Buzz in the first movie. Overall, I also feel like this movie is kind of made for a newer generation of viewers. It's like if they started a new cycle with Bonnie. I also find some scene explanations to be lazy, even if it's for comedic purposes, like their explanation of how Buzz got the key from Granny. Yes, it's funny, but on the other hand, it's pretty lazy.
Good work.
How'd you get it? How do we get that key?
Now, what about the usage of its characters? I will give them a 4 stars. Most of the important characters actually impacted the narrative of this story. Like Woody, Forky, Bo Beep, and Buzz, we followed their journey to get to Forky throughout the movie, and it's not like they did absolutely nothing during the movie, you know? Because they all played a part in some kind of plan. The reason why I give this aspect a 4 stars is because the side characters either did pretty much nothing or were there only for comedic purposes. For example, Bunny and Ducky. Tell me one thing that they did that actually impacted the story. Yeah, pretty much nothing. Because they were only there to make jokes. They could have had more importance to the story in my opinion, but hey, it is what it is. There are also some characters that you sympathize with, so you may like them more because of that. Like Bonnie when she's all alone in the kindergarten, or Gabby when she tells Forky why she needs a working voice box. Some of these characters are used so the viewers can sympathize with them, and when it's greatly made, it works, like in this movie. Also, shout out to that snow soldier who never received back any of the high fives he tried to give. I sympathize for this guy.
Combat Carl's getting played with. You guys in?
You bet.
What? You got a kid?
Yeah?
Way to beat the odds, soldier. Meet you at the playground, Pete. Combat Carl's got a piñata party to crash.
Now, what about the world surrounding the story? Honestly, I'll give them a 4 stars on this one. The only thing that made me question this movie's surrounding world is Bonnie's parents' reactions. Like, it's obviously lazy the way the writers made them react to some stuff in the movie. I have 2 examples in mind. The first one being when Buzz said out loud that Bonnie forgot her bag in the antique store. How did they not hear that coming from Buzz? But Bonnie did, you know?
Your backpack's in the antique store.
Oh no, my backpack!
Sin City was a Mavia. Angels lie.
I get that it's a kid's movie and that not everything needs to be perfectly realistic, but honestly, this movie really pushes it to its limits. In my book, this does not pass as something I shouldn't mind, because I do. It's just too much of an easy way to make the story move forward, even if it puts the realism in danger. The second example I have in mind is when the toys are controlling the van. It's the same thing here for me. How do you not look at your goddamn pedals for the whole route when they're moving alone? Like, to me, the writers didn't want to put too much effort in this movie, and they just wanted to make the story the easiest way possible. But that's just my opinion. I'm still giving them a 4 stars because apart from that, the world surrounding the story makes pretty much sense. Now, what about the meaning behind this movie? Honestly, I do not understand what this movie is about. Like, you don't necessarily need a message behind your movie to make it good, but it makes a viewer like me, appreciate it more and learn lessons from it. Most kid movies have a message behind them, but in this one, I have difficulty finding it. It's kind of about the same thing we went over in previous movies, like moving on and evolving in life. It's kind of the same message told in a confusing way. So I'll give them a 2 stars. Maybe it's just me who is too dumb to get it, but honestly, it's my loss, I guess. Now, what about the continuity of the story? Well, I don't have anything negative to say about it, so it's a 5 stars. I have honestly seen no continuity mistakes in this movie. Now, what about the mastery of the genre? Okay, so in this movie, somehow they fucked up the comedy genre. The jokes don't land really well like they did in previous movies. They are just repetitive and I hate it. The only jokes that actually made me smirk at least a little bit were the fast cuts made when Bonnie and Ducky said some stuff. Apart from that, these trash jokes, literally, did not make me laugh at all. But they still know how to make a movie for a children audience, so that's nice. They also lacked, in my opinion, in the action sequences and in the emotional sequences. The action sequences felt kind of too long and weren't really entertaining. The emotional sequences didn't properly use some aspects, like the frame or the sound, in my opinion. If you compare the last scene of Toy Story 3 and the last scene of Toy Story 4 in the third movie, the music used in this scene took up pretty much the whole sound space and hit some emotional notes that somehow still haunts me today as an adult.
Leave me alone!
The frame of Andy leaving far away from the perspective of the toys also makes it so much more emotional. In Toy Story 4, the music really doesn't hit the same and the frame neither. They also break the emotional scene with a joke, which wasn't the right moment to make a joke, you know? So no, I don't believe they used greatly some genres in this movie, so I'll give it a 2 stars. Now, let's talk more about the characters. How did I find the voice actors' performances? Honestly, they were great, but nothing really impressive. So 4 stars. Now, what about character development? I am going to give a 4 stars on this one. There are only 3 characters that had a visible development: Woody, Forky, and Gabby. But before talking about their development, I am going to quickly mention why I did not include Bo Peep. Bo started the movie as the usual Bo we know from the first 2 movies. And when we meet her during the 4th movie, she has already evolved. During 7 years, she became the lost toy we now know her as, but she just mentions it quickly to Woody. We haven't seen a development of her character after that, which means during the movie events. She started as the same, not including the intro scene, and ended as the same. Her sudden change of personality makes her character more fun to watch though. So let's move on to Woody. He started the movie as usual, being himself. He wanted to be a children's toy and believed the lost toys to be a bad situation. During the movie, Bo Peep made him change his mind and he became a lost toy himself at the end, which is a nice development, in my opinion. Forky started as an annoying character who always created trouble for Woody by wanting to be in the trash forever. But as the movie goes on, Woody shows him that he is not just trash, but a toy that is important to Bonnie. It's pretty much just a realization, but it's still a development of some sort. Gabby started the movie as some kind of villain, but as the movie went on, we learned more about her and her motives. And when she faced Harmony rejecting her, she then questioned her place there.
You can take it home if you want.
Woody had a conversation with her, and she then went from being a rival to Woody to becoming a friend of his. She ended up in the hands of another kid that wasn't the one she originally wanted, because she changed her mind and moved on from Harmony. That is a nice evolution, in my opinion. Not as good as Woody's though, but good enough. Now, what about the diversified catalog of characters? Well, let's say that most of the characters have different personalities, but honestly, most of them also have a lot of similarities. I'll give them a 4 stars on this one. We have comedic characters, courageous characters, terrifying characters, but that's all at the end. They all kind of have the same goal. So yes, it's diversified, but not as much as it could have been. Another example of that is the dummies. They all look the same, act the same, and they all work for the same person. Reminds you of someone? Yet, Lotso had different characters with different personalities working for him, whereas Gabby has the same guy multiplied by 4 working for her. I'm not calling that lazy or bad, but let's say that it wasn't improving from the previous movies. Now, what about character motives? 5 stars. Woody wants Forky back for the good of Bonnie. The toy gang wants Woody back in the van. Bo Peep wants to help Woody in his adventure. Bonnie and Ducky and Gabby wants to be a children's toy. Well, Bonnie and Ducky at the end weren't, but anyways. The only character I'm not sure had an understandable motive was Duke Kaboom. He was there to help Bo, but what did he have to gain from this? Maybe pride? I don't know. Anyways, moving on. Now, what about relations between the characters? Again, 5 stars. The relation between Woody and Bo was challenged throughout the whole movie, whether it's from the more romantic moments or the arguing moments they had. Bonnie is also pretty attached to Forky, and it's understandable why. He's the newest friend she literally made when entering kindergarten. Woody and the toy gang, there's no need to mention why it makes sense. Anyways, this whole movie is about relations between characters, and they did a pretty nice job at that. Now, what about the dialogues? Honestly, they made a lot of repetitive jokes, and it kind of turns me off from the dialogue aspect. Most of them were pretty okay, so I'll give them a 3 stars on this one. Now, let's talk more about the visuals. What did I think of the use of lightning? Honestly, it looks pretty great. I'll give them that. There is not a lot of really impressive lights used, but it looked good and made sense in the frame, so 5 stars. What about the usage of frame? Like in the previous movies, I am not really impressed by the usage of frame. It looks normal, nothing groundbreaking, 4 stars. It was also pretty weird to change to the anamorphic ratio. It's the only movie from this franchise that uses this ratio, and honestly, at the start, I was kind of shocked by this use, but it didn't impact my enjoyment of the movie, so I'm fine with it. Now, what about color grading? Well, the movie has a lot of colors, but no unique look. The colors looks great, but I feel like this movie is missing some color grading style, you know, so 4 stars. Now, what about production design? Well, the design of the antique shop is full of props that look great. The carnival is also pretty nicely designed. Honestly, this movie has quite a nice production design overall, so I'll give them a 5 stars. Now, what about the CGI and the animation overall? It looks pretty good, as usual, in terms of perfection of details. It looks better than its predecessor, but there's also a small change in character visuals. The most noticeable one being Andy, and I don't know how I feel about it. It doesn't look bad at all. I'm just not used to that at all. Bonnie also looks different a little, but all of that change does not make the CGI look bad at all. It's just a new visual style for the characters. 5 stars. Now, let's talk about sound. What did I think of the sound design? Honestly, it's pretty nice overall, but I have one issue with it. The dialogue's fading after changing scenes. You see, when we go to another scene, sometimes the last bits of dialogues are fading away while the new scene starts, and I don't particularly like that. But yeah, actually, it's not as bad as I thought at first, chat. My bad on this one. But that's the only thing negative I have to say about it. I love how they designed the sound when Bonnie and Ducky tells ways to get the key from the granny. The abrupt sound cuts. The sudden change of vibe. I like these effects they gave, so I am going to give them a 4 stars. Now, what about the music? Honestly, it's not bad. It's just that they reused a lot of old sounds, and none that were made for this movie is as good as the older ones. So I'll give them a 4 stars. Let's move on to the final category, the editing. How was the pacing? Honestly, the beginning was so fast, and I don't think it improved during the whole movie. The more private scenes between characters are all well paced, but the rest of the movie is just pretty fast and doesn't give us enough time to enjoy frames. So let's give them a 3 stars. What about the cuts and transitions? Oh, I have seen some weird cuts in this movie, but overall, I'd consider this movie to be okay in that aspect, so I'll give a 3 stars on this one. There's also quite a few repetitive ones, especially with Woody in the kindergarten. Now, let's talk about bonus points. What massive W's came out of this movie? Honestly, I don't have any. Nothing really came out so great that it should give extra points to this movie's rating. Not even the credits, because I don't like the way they cut from credits to scene. I prefer the way they did it during the last two movies. Now, what penalties will I give? First of all, -1% because they ruined the last scene. They cut the emotional tone with a joke and I hate it. They tried to recreate the infamous last scene from the previous movie, but they did not succeed and ruined it.
So long, Forky. Forky? Who's watching the doors?
Just ruining it. Look at my lips. You're ruining it.
They could have made it so much better, and I'm actually kind of mad at them for that. Also, I'm sorry, but generally, movies that use too much nostalgia are kind of admitting, to me at least, that they ran out of ideas and wanted to use the nostalgia card to keep the viewers on board. The way they reused old sounds from the franchise and the way they implemented Andy at the start of the movie just gives me this vibe, you know? It's another movie based on nostalgia, so -1%. Well, it's not 100% based on it, but it uses it a lot. Also, the jokes in this one were pretty off. I did like some of them, most of the Bunny and Ducky ones, but overall it was too repetitive, and especially Forky's joke about trash, so -1%. And so that brings us to the final note I will give to Toy Story 4, and that gives us a great 74%. Not bad, but not as good as the other ones. And so in fourth place, we have Toy Story 4 with a score of 74%. I really thought its note would be worse, but I was expecting it to be in last place before rewatching these movies. Toy Story 4 always has been my least favorite out of them, and it still is. In third position, we have Toy Story with a score of 81%. It's pretty much a classic movie that we all grew up with, and we can't deny its impact on all of our lives. I honestly thought it would be my second favorite. I'm actually surprised that I liked the sequel more. In second place, we have Toy Story 2 with a score of 85%. In my memories, I didn't really enjoy this movie when I was a child, but when I rewatched it to make this video, I honestly was surprised by my liking of it. There are some infamous scenes in this movie that I appreciate a lot, and that probably helped me liking this movie more. And finally, in first place, we have Toy Story 3 with a score of 96%. I am not surprised at all. I knew from the start that this movie would be my favorite one out of them because it's also one of my favorite movies of all time. I love it so much, and it's actually one of the only movies that actually still makes me cry to this day. Thank you for watching this video until the end. Leave a like or dislike if you want. Tell me in the comment section down below which one of these 4 movies is your favorite and explain to me why. Also, tell me in the comment section what next franchise should I rate as part as this new journey into finding out what are my favorite movies and TV series of all time. Subscribe if you want more content like this, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye now.